Welcome back, we are continuing with He Was Human by author Red Riviera. Chapter 3.
Everyone at the table stopped eating. James, who had still been smiling with his usual sense of humor, went completely silent. Roswell blinked a few times, his eyelids which looked sideways to myself and James, opening and closing over his emerald green eyes.
Elsa, why would you want to talk about that?
James said, breaking the silence. He almost seemed distressed, his breathing was deep and heavy and his eyes were almost threatening. She found herself forgetting James was a herbivore until she looked at his meal. All plants.
I've heard the stories, but it can't be true. The Orcans were a powerful and rightfully feared empire. The humans haven't had FTL for 100 years yet. A single ship couldn't have beat. Besides, they couldn't be that ruthless, could they?
Orcan warships had a crew of roughly 800 people each. Destroying 100,000 of them would have meant that a single human ship took 80 million lives. Even in war, the number was staggering.
It's true,
Roswell said, rejoining the conversation. I hadn't noticed before, but James's threatening nature seemed to have startled a lot more than me. He was still shaking. Did he seem that dangerous to a herbivore at that moment? Maybe her son/daughter wouldn't be as much of a pacifist as she had thought. Again, a problem for 5 months from now, at least according to the ship's medic. Honestly, going from 6 to 8 months before term hadn't seemed difficult at first, being her first mating cycle, but carrying one young was more difficult than she thought, and to top it off she needed a lot of vaccines and injections to make sure she and her firstborn didn't get hurt. She just had to pick James as her partner instead of one of the male Wraxum, but the petting had been so incredible while she was in heat 3 months ago. Suddenly, she felt a familiar sensation. James was petting her head.
You zoned out a bit there,
he said. His normal humor seemed back since he was smiling, but he also sounded strange. It wasn't his usual tone. It was lower, spoken in a calm fashion, but it didn't come across as anger either.
Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
She managed to say, purring from James' continuous petting.
James, can you cease that action? As enjoyable as Elzer finds it, I don't like repeating myself. Information sacred. The other party shouldn't need it to be said more than once.
Roswell said, less shaken and more with mild irritation. The foundation of Silent religion was the idea that questions are unending and answers are earned. It reflected on their curious nature. Although in this case, it made the petting a stop, leaving her rather annoyed, although Roswell's next words caught her attention to the point she forgot about her annoyance.
It's true, a single human ship did destroy 100,000 Orcan warships. Although what the Orcan usually leave out is that they invaded the humans' home system, which they called Solar. There were 2 heavily populated in the system planets, their home world Earth and a second planet Mars.
Roswell said, explaining it carefully.
Mars was a planet that was terraformed by the humans over hundreds of years. Its population is over 1 billion and is considered a polished diamond in the rough by the humans. The Orcan thought they could destroy this crown jewel of theirs, then force them to surrender by surrounding their nearby home world.
Elzer listened with increased interest. 1 billion. Having an alien world host 1 billion of one species was a cause for celebration. Less than 10 alliance species had accomplished it before FTL. The humans had only had FTL for 85 years, meaning a bulk of the settling had to have been done before they'd achieved it. It seems these monstrous death worlds were a part of more than one exclusive club. Still, targeting such planets was a common tactic in war. Crush their spirit by destroying that achievement. Roswell continued his explanation.
The ship was a human space carrier, a massive ship carrying small and medium-sized fighters, and with a crew of 3,000, a policy carried over from their naval tradition, a so-called floating army. The human ship defended Mars, only engaging ships as they got too close, thinking they weren't going to have a fight from the abandoned human outposts encountered further out the system. They were wrong. The space carrier refused to allow a single Orcan ship to get into firing range of the planet. By what the Orcans thought was the end of the battle happened. The ship and fighter had destroyed half the fleet, using knowledge of the asteroid belt between the Orcans and the planet to their advantage. But the battle had left the human ship scarred and damaged. A group of 10,000 ships got past them with a short-term FTL jump, their specialty. The fighters abandoned the main ship and chased them down without cover. They thought they could board and take this human vessel as a trophy.
Roswell let out a sigh before continuing the story. He seemed to mourn something. Still, the humans sounded as terrifying as their reputation, even considering the space carrier's ridiculous, though admittedly not unique size. Half the Orcan fleet was still insane, and doing this while at risk of dying was even more so. Most species fight or flight would have forced a surrender before they came close to dying in space.
The boarding parties landed. The first Orcan weapon scarred Mars and they thought they had won. Then it was over.
Roswell said, over just like that. It made no sense. How could that fight just end? The humans were losing.
The humans had ejected their FTL drive from their ship. The resulting explosion destroyed the remaining Orcan ships and the human space carrier barely surviving. In fact, some rumors say that an Orcan at gunpoint was forced to alter the ship's force shields to survive, but those are just rumors. The battle was over. The boarding party was never seen again and the remaining ships were destroyed by the carrier's interceptors who were ruthless, thinking the space carrier was destroyed.
Roswell finished his story. Elzer was just shocked, so that myth was no myth. 100000 ships destroyed by just one human ship. The noise caught Roswell and Elzer's attention. James had dropped his cutlery and was walking towards the door.
James,
Elzer said, catching the attention.
Sorry, I finished breakfast, so I'm going to the engineering room.
He said, looking at his plate. He'd only eaten half.
End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and visit the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.